And of course, then Buell is going to make his way. I did it a little quick, so we didn't have to wait on it to go down through there. Buell's going to make his way on over to Savannah, and then Mitchell is going to make his way eventually down into Huntsville. So this is where some things get mixed up. This is a letter from Walker. Walker, y'all know what Walker was to start with at the beginning of the war when President Davis became president? What Walker became?
Like Postmaster General or something?
Secretary of the War.
Okay, Secretary of War.
He was the one that gives the orders to to Beauregard to fire on Fort Sumter.
Okay.
He lived here in Florence for a while. He lived up in Huntsville at the time this was taking place. And so he's concerned, J.P. Benjamin is the guy that takes his place. Okay, he is the Secretary of War at this time. And he's writing to him, he's telling him that the Memphis and Charleston Railroad is important to keep because it's the vertebrae of the Confederacy, and there are no troops for its defense. None. Daniel Ruggles has been told to have ridden through the streets of Florence with his long hair flowing in the wind on his horse as he is building all the defenses of Florence. And I will say to you that I don't believe he ever came to Florence. Leroy Pope Walker came to Florence, and Ruggles put him in charge of this area. So there's a letter here from General Daniel Ruggles, who's in Corinth, and he's writing to Beauregard, and he tells in there how that he has placed Walker. You see down here, he said, I have sent two 24-pounder guns with munitions to the Florence Bridge with instructions to Brigadier General L.P. Walker to establish a battery on the south bank at or near a point indicated covering the bridge approaches and landing. I have sent Colonel Moten, and it tells what all he's doing there. But I read further than I intended to. This is what's taking place. Ruggles is in Corinth, and he's sending information to Walker here in Florence and in Tuscumbia because he's taking care of both sides of the river at this time. And that's what's happening. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. All this comes up. Why? Because them boats come here. Them river boats showed up. Well, now we need to do something. Well, did they not think they needed to do something prior to this? I mean, why all of a sudden now you need to come up with some kind of an idea? Well, it's almost too late now. And so this is in February of 1862. And then we find, this is a later thing, but in February of 1862, there were people that were sick here. And the principal, and this is Hughes, he was the commander of the 27th. And you remember they got captured at Fort Donelson. And this is the one that the company was naming that guy's name for their company. All right? He tells them, while he's in prison, he says, the principal part of my regiment was sick with measles and sent to Florence, Alabama at the time of the fight at Donelson. So it wasn't that there was a bunch of people just showed up after the fight at Donelson. There were people that are already in the hospital that the state of Alabama, I'm not state of Alabama, the Confederate government had put money aside for a hospital in Florence and another location here in Alabama somewhere. I can't remember where it was. It was down further south in Alabama. But to have a hospital here. Now, a hospital doesn't necessarily mean they went and bought, property and built an ECM over there. It just means that whatever buildings that they can use, and I showed you those buildings prior to this at the very beginning that they would have used for hospitals. There were some other hospitals in town. The most famous one, of course, is Pope's Tavern. I don't know that it was near as big a hospital as those were over there. I got so tickled, I had a friend of mine live down the street. When you go down Seminary Street, you notice that you get to a place where Pope's Tavern is and the street gets real narrow. You ever seen that? You know why? Because that was an alley. Originally it was an alley, and all the property records from over on this side, all those people who lived on Court Street, their backyard was this alley. And they had barns and things of that nature back there. So a friend of mine lived down further, and he was building him a garage, and he come up with a bunch of bones. And he just knew they were bones from Pope's Tavern, you know, Civil War soldiers' bones. And he had them tested, and they turned out to be pig bones. Pig bones, that's what they were. I tried to tell him there's probably nothing to worry about. There's probably just pig bones. But, you know, that's what people did with their hogs. They slaughtered them. Yep. Now, in the midst of all of this, here's a man by the name of John H. Rapier. Remember the barber that we talked about? Well, he had some slaves, and he was married to one of them, and she gave birth to the rest of them from him, and he wanted to free them, but they wouldn't do it. And for a long time, I thought that was an awful thing. The city of Florence wouldn't do that, but come to find out, I learned later on, and running through the state records and stuff, that they actually passed a law that nobody would be able to free their slaves at this particular time, and that's the reason why he wasn't freed, or they weren't freed. This is him with his family right there. Now, he had a son by the name of James T. Rapier, who ended up going to Canada and got educated at the college up there, and his father, John Rapier, paid for it. He also paid for another son to get in college. He ends up becoming a medical doctor and is working for the Union Army at the time of the Civil War. Now, I'm going to kind of go through these kind of quick. This is a discussion between Halleck and Buell about where they should go. And Halleck is telling him, come over to Savannah or Florence, and we can do it. We then can operate either on Decatur or Memphis or on both, as may appear best. So we have the Florence Bridge, and it becomes important. And he says, back to him, he says, the thing which I think of vital importance is that you seize and hold the bridge at Florence in force. And then in March 8, 1862, headquarters at the District of North Alabama in Tuscumbia, Walker writes, in this connection, as I mentioned in a previous communication, I propose with the Negro force at my disposal to erect other defensive works at other points on the river and to enable me to do promptly. I would be glad if you would authorize me to employ at the compensation of a captain of engineers. And Major F.M. Robertson, formerly commandant of the military academy at LaGrange, he was going to have him working with him on this. Now we have another discussion between a guy named Helm and Johnston. So after the first day's march, Colonel Helm will precede General Hindman, take the post at Tuscumbia, and take every means to obtain information of the enemy. So Johnston writes Helm, he says, make silent preparations to burn the Florence Bridge as soon as the enemy gunboats may pass Eastport, or the enemy approach Florence from the north side of the river. Again, he wants to know. He says, the information I get indicates that Johnston is withdrawing the principal part of the force of Decatur and connecting at Tuscumbia. I find there is still a gunboat here. and then please inform me whether the bridge at Florence has been destroyed. Now, why would he need to know that? And see, I told the guy at Shiloh, asked the guy about that. I said, why didn't he need any discussion about Beal's interest in the bridge and all? He said, well, he wasn't interested in the bridge. So, okay. Johnston says that Decatur is held by a small force. Guard the bridge. My force is now united, holding Burnsville, Iuka, and Tuscumbia with one division here. Again, burn the bridge. April 6th and 7th is the Battle of Shiloh. I'm not going to go into that. I think everybody here knows that there was a battle there. Brigadier General S.A.M. Wood was at Shiloh. He led in his corps there, the 3rd Corps. He was the brigade commander of the 3rd Brigade that went, what was that, Fraley's Field? The first place you go down there where they...
Fraley Field.
Yeah, Fraley Field. And this just shows you some places where he was during the battle. And I'm only putting that in there just because he was from Florence. William Patton, Robert M. Patton's son, was killed there. April 13th, 1862, we find that the letter here from Coffee, he didn't have much paper. So he starts writing the letter, and it was hard for me to get this in writing, and it took me a little while on this one. And then he flipped it over, and of course he signed the signature down here. And he says in this letter, he says, the Florence Bridge should be burnt. Now he's in Corinth, Mississippi, as it will save the county from a large cavalry force, if nothing else. Of course, he didn't have any idea that Cornyn was going to come through there. I hope you may not be annoyed with them, but if you are, bear it much as you can, and if any outrage is committed, write note to the commander and send it by a Negro. May God overlook and protect you. Alexander D. Coffee. That's General Coffee's son. And then on April 12th, Saturday, Joshua Burns Moore, he writes in his journal, went to town, learned that the Federals had taken Huntsville, stayed in town a while, learned they had, and when it's this town, he's talking about Tuscumbia, stayed in town a while, learned that they had taken Decatur, Alabama, started home, went to South Florence, in the evening learned that Helm was destroying the bridge between this and Cortland. We will get no mails now. And I love what he says here. All communication is cut off. So much for the revolution. Now he lived just east of what is now Muscle Shoals over there. Then on the 13th, he says, stayed at home, learned the Federals 1,500 strong crossed Town Creek this morning in pursuit of Major Robertson, Joshua Burns Moore. And then on the 14th, Monday, went to town, heard Federals were at Town Creek. Todd came out and pressed a wagon and team and driver from Mrs. Purcell, which was his mother-in-law, as he said, to haul government stores. Very interesting. If you, one of our histories that's put out by the Tennessee Valley Historical Society, this came out of that. Then he says on the 15th, Tuesday, last night, Helms burned the bridge over Tennessee at South Florence, as they said, military necessity. We went to town where we learned the Federals had burned Mr. Elliott's house in Lawrence County. Now, Mr. Helms here, in case you don't know, if you remember, there was a story of Abraham Lincoln's wife's sister who came and stayed at the White House after her husband died. Okay? That was her husband. He was killed in the Battle of Chickamauga but he was the one that set the bridge on fire here in Florence. And I've always thought it was interesting that it would be Abraham Lincoln's brother-in-law that burns the bridge to keep his brother-in-law's people from coming across it. And notice that there's a railroad track on top and a bridge on the bottom on this one. And there was some discussion at a roundtable meeting here a while back, and I was able to come up with enough information to prove that the bridge then looked similar to this. It had a bridge on the bottom for traffic and the railroad bridge on top. The Army of the Ohio 3rd Division, General Arnsby McKnight Mitchell, in April 1862, he comes into this part. He is going to go into Huntsville, and then he's going to take several different places around, one including Huntsville, of course, and this is a picture of downtown Huntsville at that time. Then he's going to go east, and he is going to take Athens. Part of his command is going to, under Negley, is going to come down from Pulaski and take Rogersville. And then they're going to take Florence, and they're going to take Tuscumbia. This is a picture of the Decatur Bridge burning that Mitchell burned. And then your favorite guy over here on the left, Turchin. I don't have time to go into all of this, but Turchin was a character. Yeah, he basically told him in Athens, I'm just going to turn my head, you do whatever you want to do. Yeah. But he was from Germany, and he had fought like that in Germany.
I thought it was Russian.
Was it Russian?
I thought it was Russian, yeah.
All right, but ain't much difference in the two. They both hate each other. From deserters, they find information about the bridge at Florence that had been burned, and it's not there, and he lets Stanton know about this. I'm going to kind of go through this a little quicker. My forces all withdrawn from the southern side of the Tennessee River. The bridge at Decatur is destroyed. My line is now extends westward by rail to Athens, and my cavalry outpost to Florence. This is y'all. Some of y'all went out to the Houston place here a while back, didn't you, Lanny?
Yeah.
Well, that gentleman, George S. Houston, grew up in that house down there where y'all went. Yeah. And then he ends up and becomes a politician and moves to Athens. And this is his home in Athens, and it's one of the places that Turchin's being ramshacked. This is Negley coming down and taking Rogersville, and they have a skirmish down there during that period of time in May. So the Army of the Ohio comes on in here with Buell, and he brings all of his troops into Florence. There is a little skirmish, a little battle. And I want to get to that. I debated about keeping all this in here. So Beale comes into Florence. Bragg is in Chattanooga. That's Beale, and these are all of his division commanders. If you'll notice on here, Division 1 Commander is George H. Thomas. What is he known as?
Rock of Chickamauga.
The Rock of Chickamauga, yes, exactly right. McCook, what do we know about him?
Had a brother that was a Yankee. Fighting McCooks.
Yeah.
Fighting McCooks, yeah.
But what happened to this guy?
McCook gets killed over at Newmarket.
Right.
By Gurley.
Right.
Yeah, Gurley.
And Gurley is elected sheriff after that.
Because he didn't get executed even though he was supposed to go to the gallows.
Yeah. So then we got Mitchell, and we know about he was the first one to get in here, and then Willie Nelson. You know, who would have known that Willie Nelson was one of the commanders? And Thomas Crittenden and so on down. Excuse me, this is General Fry, and he is a guy that comes up a lot, He is the chief of staff of General Don Corliss Buell. And if you read the official records very much, his name's going to come up a good bit. This is an interesting story. This is a young man. I was able to find his picture. And this is a story he tells about coming here to Florence. He says, we are still laying here at Florence and not much prospects of moving. And for my part, I don't care much how long we remain here, for we have a good camping ground and the very best of spring water and everything convenient. There is more people in Florence than any town we have been in for some time. And there appears to be a great many Union people here. In most of towns we have passed through, the citizens have all run off and left their homes afraid of the Yankees. This is a note from the city council that's saying that this guy wasn't prepared for his reports because they were strewn all over the office by the Yankees that come. This is what I want to get to. July 25th, 1862, Frank C. Armstrong comes up here from Tupelo and goes to Moulton, and he comes up to Cortland because he believes that's the center of the activity for the Union. And he takes Cortland, and then he goes down and takes, what is that, Trinity? Yeah, takes Trinity and a few other places up and through there. And so that battle is in July 25th, 1862. There's several different articles about it. As this commander is at Town Creek Bridge, and this is on July 25th, 1862. Okay, it's at Town Creek Bridge. This is the same day this other happened. And he's writing to Mr. Winston, Isaac Winston. He says, you know, we have run into some problems here. And we need some vegetables and corn and stuff from you. So you don't see the answer here because this is just a letter to him. But in a newspaper article, it tells about this story. And Mr. Winston says to him, he says, I'll burn my fields myself before I give you any corn. And so I found that interesting. I thought that was kind of funny.
Hey, Brother David, that's when
Okay, all this is just, and so I want to get to this, and we may stop right here. Buell's Army of the Ohio crosses through Florence. General George Thomas's 1st Division is here, and in that is Colonel John Marshall Harlan, the 10th Kentucky Regiment, who was involved in some of that along the railroad track that we just looked at on the 25th. And this is prior to that. So there he is. And he has made his headquarters. He's making his headquarters at Mapleton over here. That's what Mapleton looked like before it does today. I'm sure it didn't look like that at the time, but it got kind of run down at one time. But this was his headquarters, just across the river. I thought it was at Florence Library there for a minute. And as you go up Pine Street, come up the hill from the river, it's on the left at the top of the hill. And Dr. William H. Mitchell was arrested. And what he was arrested for was because he was praying for the Confederacy and praying for Jeff Davis, and Union soldiers were sitting inside the place. And some of them didn't like it. Now, Miss Sally Independence Foster, she tells about him being arrested and taken as a prisoner while he was praying, and took him over the river and sent word to his wife that she must come to see him or she would not see him again. Now, that's not quite what happened, but he wasn't praying at the time they came up and arrested him, according to this guy. He says to let us pray, and the prayer we were afterwards told was the formal one prescribed by the Presbyterian Church Authority of the South, and contained an invocation of the divine blessing. President of the Confederate States, and upon so on and so forth. Okay? This has not been generally expected by the visitors, and it produced at the instant quite an appreciable commotion. He said a variety of ejaculations not in the usual line of liturgical responses, and were heard in various parts of the house. And some got up and walked out to vent their indignation in the open air. Most of us remained, however, to see the services through. The prayer ended, the sermon began, simple, earnest, well-composed, and well-delivered discourse, interesting, edifying, and every way unexceptional. The preacher was himself the personification of Christian grace and dignity in the pulpit, and we were soon in the mood to ignore if we could not forgive or forget the offensive prayer. He had probably half completed his discourse when the tramp of marching men was heard coming down and the main aisle, and a squad of provost guard halted and fronted at the altar before the minister. A colonel of infantry led the detachment, and now he interrupted the preacher and charged him with insulting the uniform of the United States, and so on. They take him across the river, and they send him on a boat up to Alton Prison on the Mississippi River. And this is what they sent me. Did it look like that? I gave that to them several years ago. Now, what's at the top, these are actually two separate papers. What's at the top is when he went in, and the bottom is when he came out. And I just stuck them together so that you could see them all at one time.
How long was you there for?
That's the Foster's home, George Washington Foster. You see that fence that went across in front of it? That's old George. And that's his wife. Now, I've got a better pictures of both of them when they look prettier. But the old slave said that Mr. Washington Foster here was only reason why he got to marry her. She was the one that had the money. And the reason why he got to marry her was because he was a pretty boy. And he said he was a nice guy until he got to drinking. He said when he get to drinking, and he wasn't such a nice guy. Now this is on August the 22nd, and she's saying that he's come home. Is that the one? No, this is when her daddy gets arrested in August. I thought that seemed a little too soon. Then in September the 19th, Iuka, Mississippi is fought. October 3rd through 4th, Corinth, Mississippi is fought. And the war was real and deadly, Corinth, Mississippi. These are bodies. I'm trying to remember what that guy's name is on the far left.
Colonel Rogers.
Rogers, yes, Rogers. Okay, October 10th, to our great joy, Dr. Mitchell came home today. These are the last skirmishes in 1862. Skirmish at Little Bear Creek, the action at Bear Creek, December 9th. December 12th is a skirmish at Cherokee Station. December 12th, skirmish at Little Bear Creek. December 31st, 1862 to January 1st through the 2nd is a big battle up in Murfreesboro or Stones River, whichever way you want to call it. And that's what was leading out of the state that year. Now, at this time, at this newspaper, this is the first paper that's been out since April. And they're telling here it's the occupation of the county or country by the Federal Army suspended temporarily the publication of Florence Gazette. We wish to reproduce to the people of Lauderdale County that old and useful journal, and we trust its long and faithful services will be kindly remembered and rewarded, and it lasted about 3 months. And then it didn't get printed again until the war was over. And there's the Battle of Stones River. Now, I want to say something else to you. This is in closing. My big thing in doing all of this and starting the book and all was for me to learn what the people here went through, what happened here. So I try to cover all the military stuff that happened here, but I don't want to miss what the people went through and what the people here said. So those diaries and those journals and even the Union soldiers' journals and newspaper articles, a lot of stuff that we have. And so we want to tell that story, and we want to tell their story, and not just white people's stories, but black people's stories also, because they all lived here. Yep. And to tell you how prominent they were, did you know that in 1860 census there were more blacks living in Limestone County than there were whites? And you wonder why some of the ladies got concerned in Florence when the blacks was going out in the streets at night, and some of them were slaves and some of them were free, and they wanted it stopped.